Back here on HQ, Jamey Eisenberg, he's been on a roll this last two starts of the week, so we're going to try to keep the streak going. And this week, we go to the Carolina Panthers. Yes, the Panthers, where Chuba Hubbard is Jamey's start of the week. The Panthers, of course, making that QB change from Bryce Young to Andy Dalton against the Raiders. And the numbers were for Hubbard, were good. 21 carries for 114 yards, adding 5 catches for 55 yards and a touchdown on 5 targets. 27.9 PPR points, so not too bad for Chuba Hubbard. He is Jamey's start of the week as the Panthers are taking on the Bengals. And we have Jamey Eisenberg, Dave Richard here. We're going to start with the start of the week and then go through all of your sits and starts for week 4 in the NFL. Starting with Chuba Hubbard here, going up against the Bengals. It's an Andy Dalton revenge game, if you will, I guess. But we know this Bengals team, they like to let running backs get some touchdowns, Jamey.
They definitely do. You know, we saw a great game in week 1 for Ramondre Stevenson against his defense. Then Isaiah Pacheco had a good game in week 2. And then last week, it wasn't the best game for the running backs, but Brian Robinson Jr. still scored a touchdown. But really, it's about Chuba Hubbard and this Panthers offense and just turning the corner and looking like a legitimate NFL offense for once. And this could be the last time we see Chuba Hubbard in this featured role because Jonathan Brooks eligible to return next week. So this might be the last hurrah that we get out of him as a fantasy option, but should be a great game. I mean, you saw the things that we were looking for from a Dave Canales running back in this offense was the role in the passing game. 5 catches, 55 yards and a touchdown, 5 targets. Now they're down Adam Thielen. So this is a game I think is going to be back and forth. Both these defenses stink. And this could be a big opportunity for Chuba Hubbard. He's the #1 running back for me this week.
Okay. He's just outside of being a #1 for me, but that's not sliding him. I like what I've seen from him, not just last week, but the week before. At least 14 touches each of his last 2 games. And Cincinnati's defense is terrible. Bottom 5 in running back rushes per game allowed. Bottom 5 in defensive rush success rate. This is a matchup that I think Chuba Hubbard can exploit. And even if the Panthers are trailing in this game, Chuba can catch passes out of the backfield and make plays that way too.
Now, to both of your points saying that both of these defenses stink, that kind of brings us to some of your starts, which is Zach Moss over on Cincy's side of the ball, who I tried to sit last time we were all together, but he was actually one of your starts, Dave, and he did come through for me finally when I did start him in week 3, but he's a start again, Jamey, for you.
Yeah, Jacqueline, just a little tip. We like defenses that stink, so that's
yes,
kind of, you know, this isn't rocket science. Find players against defenses that stink. Yeah, so Zach Moss in a good spot, you know, coming off a strong game last week against Washington. Carolina's run defense has obviously been miserable, so for the time being while he's healthy, look, Chase Brown ran well last week too against the Commanders, but he's still the featured back in terms of Moss. I think he'll have another strong game. Tony Pollard gets the Dolphins defense that's definitely miserable as well. We saw that from Charbonnet last week's start of the week, had over 25 PPR points. Geno Smith, I think, is going to have his best game of the season to keep up with the Lions in what should be a shootout. He's been fantastic in Detroit. He's played in Detroit each of the last 2 seasons, and he's been money for fantasy managers. So like him as a #1 quarterback this week. Deontay Johnson, very similar to the same theme that we talked about with the Panthers. And then you look at George Pickens. He hasn't had this big breakout game yet. It's coming this week. The Colts defense is absolutely abysmal, and I think we'll see Justin Fields, as he's getting more comfortable knowing that he's the starter, going to take some more shots down the field to Pickens. I think he's got top 10 upside this week.
Okay.
I think the Pollard call is a good call, too. That Dolphins defense really has been terrible. Charbonnet looked like a megastar last week. Pollard's been the lead back for Tennessee this year. Certainly expect him to hit at least 15 PPR points, almost as good as Chuba Hubbard.
Okay, let's go to your starts, Dave, because you do have Mark Andrews on here.
I do.
Which last week he put up a big fat goose egg, but he's in your starts.
I would have been yelled at if I put Andrews on my start list last year because he was so awesome, but he's been dreadful this year. I think he's a necessary piece for Baltimore to win this game against Buffalo. Bills are without Matt Milano at linebacker. The middle of the field is going to be open for him, and I think he will get some short targets and more volume. He talked about it this week. He said that he wants to get more involved. Here's a crazy stat I came across. This is from Pro Football Focus. He's 7th in separation rate among tight ends. You wouldn't think that watching him, mainly because you haven't been able to see him run many routes.
He's run 7 routes, so on all of them,
and half of those routes last week were blocks. It's crazy, but they're going to need him this week. It's going to be a high-scoring game, so I do like Mark Andrews. I like T. Higgins as well. Last week, he knocked the rust off. Now he comes back. That matchup against Carolina, crummy defenses. Let's start players against them. I think Cincinnati gets their first win of the year. You can't get away from Terry McLaurin at this point after what we saw last week. Baker Mayfield, I don't want to panic on. He's a low-end QB1 for me. Philadelphia only has 4 sacks this season. They do get pressure on the quarterback, but they don't actually get to the quarterback, and I think that'll help Baker Mayfield. Plus, I'm not sure if the Bucs will be able to run like other teams have run against Philadelphia this year. Hence, Baker can go out there, have a decent game.
We had a fun conversation on our podcast about what to do with Carson Steele, you know, knowing that Kareem Hunt is going to play. Will he still be the guy? and that's the biggest question is, will he still have 17 touches like he had against Atlanta? Will he still keep Hunt off the field? Will Perine's role change at all? I think it's going to come, any touches for Kareem Hunt, they come at the expense of Samaje Perine.
Yes.
And the one thing to keep an eye on with Andrews, I agree with everything you said. I think this should be a big game for him. But they did have 3 offensive linemen banged up in practice on Wednesday. And that's one thing that has really hurt Mark Andrews is he's been asked to block and asked to block and asked to block. And so when you're taking on this Bills defense and that front, is he going to spend too much time blocking again? And if he does, we're going to see Mark Andrews cut in a lot of fantasy leagues because he has to have a good game at this point, because at this point you're seeing Mike Gesicki, Brenton Strange, Tyler Conklin. I mean, the who's who of crap at tight end is outperforming Mark Andrews right now. If he does not have a big game this week, it's going to be a lot of panic going on.
Man, the tight ends have just been tough. I think
it has been
Trey
very weird.
Not really doing much for me.
Right, now he's concussed.
He's been fantastic by comparison.
Right, but you can at least get 8 PPR points out of him.
5 fantasy points a game being fantastic.
Well, last week he got concussed.
Yeah,
but the game before that he was better.
Dalton Kincaid was actually double digits, which again against this Jags team, that's not really that hard.
See, this is what happens when you have 25 fantasy teams now, Jacqueline. You have a lot of different tight ends.
I have 3, Jamey, and I will never have more than that because it's a full-time job. I fully understand the pressure and the time.
It's our full-time job.
I know it is. Let's talk about your sit, Dave, because you have Najee on there. Again, we talked about this Steelers team, and he's somebody that's a sit for you.
Barely a sit. I just like a couple of other running backs better than Najee. A little bit worried about Cordell Patterson taking some work away from him. A little bit worried about Justin Fields taking some work away from him. But I still don't mind him as a flex. In fact, I like a lot of these guys as flexes, just not as traditional top 24 type players. The matchup is great for him against the Colts. Just a little bit worried about him finding the end zone, getting 100 yards, etc. I just don't know if he can come through for that. Even with the favorable matchup, he's going to share just a little bit too much. I'm out on Colts. Doesn't matter who they are, except for Jonathan Taylor.
Okay.
I'll be in on Jonathan Taylor. But Michael Pittman, I've been out on since the offseason. I don't see that changing now. And really a tough matchup against the Steelers. Jackson Smith and Jigba, we thought maybe he'd keep it going after what he did in week 2. He didn't. I think Seattle attacks downfield. This is to Jamey's point about Geno Smith. He's had some monster games against the Lions. That Lions secondary is bad. Their pass rush is now a huge question mark as well. I don't know if Smith and Jigba will get a lot of downfield targets compared to DK and Lockett. I'd be a little hesitant to count on him, even in full PPR, as anything more than a flex. Same thing with Shaheed. That offensive line's in peril all of a sudden. And then Mike Gesicki's on the list just as a streaming tight end. I like him. But I think T. Higgins takes a step forward this week. Yoshivas has scored some touchdowns. What are we asking for out of Gesicki at this point? 7 or 8 PPR points? I want to aim higher than that. 7 or 8 PPR points is the #1 tight end. It's unfortunate, but it is. There's actually 2 guys on your list I like a lot. I like Najee Harris a lot this week because Jalen Warren most likely not going to play. Yes, Cordell Patterson will get some opportunities, but this Colts defense, the first 2 running backs that they faced, Josh Jacobs and Joe Mixon, absolutely destroyed them. He's not going to do that. But we saw last week without Warren on the field, he had 5 catches. We love when Najee catches the ball, and he's going to get 3 to 5 catches in this game. This is going to be the first time that he scores a touchdown, and I love JSN this week. I think this is an absolute throw-it-all-over-the-place game for Geno Smith. We saw that 2 weeks ago against the Patriots. He had 16 targets. I don't think he's getting 16 targets, but I do think we're getting probably close to 10, and anytime you're going to get that opportunity for JSN, your window to buy low on JSN is right now because he's going to have a huge game against this defense, and you're going to regret not getting him on your fantasy team. Okay, all right. So we always talk about themes, right? We like crappy defenses, and any wide receiver that's going up against Patrick Surtain is going to be on the sits list as well. That is also a theme, Jamey. Yeah, and it's been proven. You know, you go back for the first 3 weeks of the season, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Mike Evans. We said this last week about Evans. Don't play him. And you saw what happened. And so Garrett Wilson, the only benefit to Wilson is he spends a lot of time in the slot. Surtain has traveled into the slot with some guys so far this year, but will this be an opportunity for for Wilson to escape some of that coverage? I don't think Aaron Rodgers needs to rely on Garrett Wilson because we've seen that. We've seen Allen Lazard find the end zone 3 times already this season, 2 of them from Rodgers. We saw last week Tyler Conklin have a big game. Mike Williams' time is coming. Breece Hall obviously had the backfield as well. So Garrett Wilson is not a top 24 wide receiver. You can get away from him. Same thing with Jalen Waddle. Obviously, it's been tough without Tua Tagovailoa in his career. Now 9 games, averaging less than 50 yards receiving. We could see Snoop Huntley as the quarterback. He's going to run, not throw. So Waddle's in a lot of trouble right now against a really good secondary. Rachaad White may be losing his job. So Bucky Irving better be rostered in all of your leagues, and Rachaad White's got to step up this week. Hopefully he's still involved in the passing game. That's kind of what saved him so far this season, but his rushing production, Bucky Irving is almost doubling his output there. J.K. Dobbins is obviously one of my favorite players. I hope to see him run well, but now you're looking at 2 tackles missing for the Chargers, maybe Justin Herbert either playing at less than 100% or not playing at all, and the Chiefs' run defense going back to the latter part of the season through the playoffs, they've shut down the run. And so this is just a tough opportunity for J.K. Dobbins. I hope for Sportsline,
he does what he does, but I don't expect that this week. And Dave mentioned it. It's tough to trust Anthony Richardson and all the Colts not named Jonathan Taylor. I want to see from Richardson, I want to see him run and run and run, because that will save his fantasy production this week. He's clearly struggling as a passer. To get his production up, I think to make him feel more confident, I'd like to see a 60, 70, 80-yard running game for him. He's averaging about 30 yards per game, because that will sort of flip the script a little bit, I think, on how teams are defending him and maybe open up some things more for this offense. But right now, throwing the ball is just not what Richardson's doing right.
The problem is that the matchup against the Steelers is not the matchup you want to have if you want him to do that. So down the line, there will be some matchups that are more favorable for him. I think this is an easy week to get away from Anthony Richardson. I have him ranked 15th, and I think that might be too high.
Yeah, we know the Steelers, a huge part of why they're 3-0 is because of that defense. Exactly. Now it is, my personal favorite time of the segment. It's Jacqueline's fantasy question of the day. So I have two or three.
You have that written down. That's good.
I do. It literally says that in black and white. Sam Darnold or Jared Goff? Darnold's could be banged up here, but Goff hasn't really been doing much for me.
Goff has not been good. We said at the beginning of the season, if you want a safe quarterback, the schedule's awesome. At home, he's usually been great. Indoors, he's usually been great. Yeah. So it was set up perfect for him, and he's just underperforming right now. Offensive line's a concern. We haven't seen this offensive line protect him to the same extent. They are going to run on Seattle. This is how they're going to beat the Seahawks. The Seahawks' pass defense has been fantastic. They haven't faced a good quarterback yet, but their pass defense has been fantastic. I think this is where the coaching change really comes into play. So Jared Goff, I'll take my chances with Darnold right now with the way that he's playing. His coaching change has been fantastic for him. So may get Jordan Addison back as well. I like Darnold a lot better.
Jamey mentioned the offensive line. The starting center for the Lions is Frank Ragnow. He tore his pec. Who knows if he even plays. If he tries and plays through that, he's an absolute beast to do it. But he could struggle doing so. I think Darnold's actually the safer play.
Okay. Well, I have more questions, but we're out of time, so I'll just have to find you guys in the newsroom later. Jamey, Dave, we certainly appreciate it walking us through starts and sits for Week 4. And, of course, you can hear the fellas on Fantasy Football Today, wherever you find your podcast. Download, follow, listen, or you can watch right now by scanning that QR code on your screen.